Good evening. I'm Sheriff Glenn Hill. I'm chairman of the Prince William-Manassas Regional Jail Board, and welcome everyone. Deputy, could you call the roll, please?
Ashworth. Ashworth.
I'm here.
Austin is not here. Bailey.
Here.
Bernard.
Here.
Clymer.
Here.
Guzman.
Here.
Hill.
Here.
King.
Here.
Lennox.
Here.
Smith. Smith. And Torres.
Here.
Thank you, Debbie. At this time, I want to ask Mr. Sharon Panda to review the procedures for the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and related state of emergency, the Prince William-Manassas Regional Jail Board is holding this meeting remotely by electronic means. A resolution in that regard will be presented to you in a moment. This is the first virtual meeting of the Jail Board. We appreciate your patience and understanding as we go through this meeting. Public access to the meeting is being provided by live streaming of the meeting through YouTube. The notice of this virtual meeting was posted last Friday on the Jail Board's website. The local press was also notified. The chairman will conduct the meeting as set forth in the agenda. We will use the following protocols. Members are asked to please identify yourself when speaking. For those matters which require a vote, the chairman will introduce each item, then ask for a motion and a second. The chairman will repeat who made the motion and second. The chairman will then ask the members of the jail board if there are any comments or questions on the item. The chairman will then call for a vote. All votes will be taken by Secretary Deborah Adamy by roll call and recorded in the meeting minutes. If any jail board member needs to leave the meeting, please verbally advise the chairman prior to leaving so that the time can be reflected in the meeting minutes. Are there any questions about the process? Mr. Chairman, I believe then we're ready for public comments. Public written comments were received until 5 p.m. on Monday, June 15th, 2020. They have been made available to the jail board and to the public on the website as of Tuesday, June 16th, 2020. Mr. Chairman, I think I skipped over the resolution. I will do that now. I apologize.
All right, Ms. Panda.
There is a resolution authorizing electronic jail board meetings during the COVID-19 pandemic disaster in the board package and on the website agenda. It is quite lengthy, Mr. Chairman and members of the jail board. I will refer you to the end in which, after recounting all of the authority for this meeting to be held fully electronically, the jail board approves this meeting, and jail board meeting is being conducted electronically and not with a quorum in a single location during the pandemic emergency, and that all provisions of the legislation requiring and allowing for virtual meetings will be in effect taken by the jail board with respect to this meeting. Mr. Chairman, you have, and the jail board has, that three-page resolution for consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Panda. Could I get a motion to approve the resolution for the virtual meeting due to the COVID-19 pandemic?
Doug Keene here. I make a motion to approve that we accept that notice.
Motion made by King,
Lisa Clymer, second.
second by Ms. Clymer. Any questions? Deputy, could you call the roll, please?
Ashworth.
Yes.
Austin not here. Bailey.
Yes.
Bernard.
Yes.
Clymer,
Yes.
Guzman,
Yes.
Hill,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Lennox,
Yes.
Smith, and Torres.
Yes.
Unanimous, sir.
Thank you, Deb. Dave, you want to go over the public comments again, please?
Yes, sir, I will. As public comments were received by the jail board until 5 p.m. on Monday, June 15th, 2020. They were then subsequently made available to the jail board and to the public, including posting on the website on Tuesday, June 16th, 2020.
Thank you, Ms. Pendak. Next is chairman's comments. First, I want to thank our new jail board members for joining us, Reverend Koza Bailey, Ms. Elizabeth Guzman, and Ms. Tracy Leonard. Thank you for your willingness to serve on the Prince William-Manassas Regional Jail Board. I also want to recognize Chief Barry Bernard for his lengthy service on the jail board from April the 5th, 2016, of course, until July 1st, 2020. And of course, Chief Bernard, on behalf of the jail board and the members of the jail staff, we want to wish you a good retirement, and please enjoy yourself and come by and see us sometime. Also, I want to recognize Reverend Victor Riley. Reverend Riley served on the jail board from November 15, 2000 until May 19th of this year, almost 20 years on the jail board. And also want to recognize Paul Nichols. Paul Nichols served on the jail board from December 16, 2014 until May 19, 2020. So all the members, my sincere thank you for your participation. We got a lot accomplished with your support. We got some good programs in, and so I can't say enough about your participation on the board. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, Barry Bernard.
Go ahead, sir.
Just want to say thank you very much. Appreciate your kind remarks, and very nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. At this time, I need a motion to approve the agenda for June 17, 2020.
Doug Keane here. I make a motion, we approve the agenda as written.
Motion by King,
Barry Bernard, I second it.
seconded by Chief Barry Bernard. Any questions? Hearing none, Debbie, please call the roll.
Ashworth,
Yes.
Austin's not here. Bailey,
Yes.
Bernard,
Yes.
Clymer,
Yes.
Guzman,
Yes.
Hill,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Lennox,
Yes.
Smith, not here, and Torres.
Yes.
Thank you, Debbie. At this time, we'll have a report from the superintendent.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome new jail board members. Good to have everyone here tonight. I'm going to do a quick review of the COVID-19 situation here at the Adult Detention Center. We'll go back a little bit to March and move forward. In the very beginning, staff and inmates were notified about symptoms to be on the lookout for, and we initiated a 14-day quarantine for all inmates committed to the Adult Detention Center. They were monitored by the medical staff twice a day. This was enabled by the judge's early release program to clear space for us to be able to do that. The use of personal protective equipment is worn by staff, inmates, and visitors. We initiated temperature checks for anyone entering the adult detention center, including contractors. Inmates working in the kitchen have their temperatures checked when leaving the pod and returning. Inmate haircuts were suspended. Inmate personal visitation was limited to 2 individuals, non-contact, and attorney visits were limited to non-contact only. ADC volunteer program was suspended. Inmate recreation and programs were canceled, which includes opportunities, alternatives to resources, OAR, a reentry program, the drug dorm, the chaplains program, and religious services. Work release and the inmate workforce were also canceled. Pretrial services continue to meet with the inmates. However, procedures were altered. On May 27th and 28th, in coordination with the Virginia Department of Health, the National Guard tested 454 inmates and 335 staff. 21 inmates and 2 staff were positive. Since March, the total number of inmates tested positive, 64, and staff tested positive, 16. 2 major outbreaks included inmate kitchen workers and staff assigned to support services or transportation and court escort section. To date, 3 inmates and 3 staff are positive. Inmates have not been charged medical copay for COVID-19 related issues, nor charged for testing. Inmates with no funds are always not denied medical treatment here at the Adult Detention Center. The State Department of Corrections canceled accepting inmates from local jails around the state, with an exception of seriously mentally ill or medical situations. We're waiting for an update. Our COVID-19 partners included the Emergency Operations Center in Prince William County, the Health Department, National Guard, Employee Health, Virginia Association of Regional Jails, Prince William Leadership Team, Risk Management, and the County Fire Department's Infectious Disease Officer. The Adult Detention Center essential staff, both security and civilian, have done a great job carrying out the proper procedures while keeping our COVID numbers down. Everyone showed up for work each day with no excuses and night, 7 days a week, despite the risk of COVID-19 in this environment. I commend our staff greatly. COVID-19 cases in corrections around the country is up by 73%. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Do we have any questions for the superintendent at this time?
Doug Keene here, Sheriff. No questions. I just want to thank the Colonel for being quick to respond to that. I think they did an outstanding job and should be recognized.
Thanks, Doug. The great staff here, the ones that have their hands on it every day, they deserve every bit of credit.
Thank you, Chief, for those comments. Any questions from any more board members?
Colonel Meletis, this is Raul Torres.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a breakdown on the race and ethnicity of the people that are infected within the correctional system? The AD?
I do not have that with me, no, sir.
Okay.
This is Lisa Clymer with a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Colonel, do you know when you'll be able to restart programs within the facility?
We have slowly started bringing some things back. Haircuts, we have started a little bit. We've opened up our gym, but we've limited the numbers of inmates going. They're not playing basketball or volleyball, those kind of things, but they're just able to go and walk around. We stress distancing, and of course they wear their mask at all time. And we just got back to today to returning the kitchen workers back to the kitchen. So each week we're going to be doing some things very slowly as we open up here. And certainly our big goal is to return these great programs that help in our reentry of inmates back into the community.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Carol Viana will give us our approval of the commissary budget.
Hello, Carol Viana. I've provided a brief explanation along with the proposed commissary budget for FY 2021, which begins on July 1st. I didn't know if any board members had any questions about the commissary budget in general before I begin. Okay, so we are, some of our items this year, you'll see on the list, the inmate television infrastructure, things like that are one-time costs that are carrying forward. We were unable to complete that project due to the virus. All of these items are items that are to be for the benefit of inmates per state code. So this is what we proposed. If anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I would ask for the jail board to approve the budget for fiscal 21.
Yes, and before I ask for a
Any
motion to
questions?
approve, I want to make sure all the members know that the commissary budget is not taxpayers' dollars. These are profits that's generated from our commissary. You know, as members, as we move on and you get a chance to visit the adult detention center, this is one of the areas that we'll cover so you can get a complete understanding of how the commissary works and how we generate the profits.
Sheriff, this is Reverend Bailey. Are you going to entertain a motion before questions, or do you want questions before the motion?
I'm gonna put the motion out first, and then I'll tell you what, Reverend, I can go ahead and take questions now, and then we can get into the approval of the budget. So if you have questions, please go ahead.
Okay, I have a couple. Just trying to understand how the budget was constructed. So first of all, I'm assuming that the reason that there is such a great balance left from the budgeted amounts is because, like the example given, not all of the programs were able to be executed during FY 2020 because of COVID-19. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so then understanding what you just said about the TV program, I'm trying to understand on what basis we had even a mild uptick in the FY 2021 proposed budget above the FY 2020 proposed budget. I just don't understand.
Well, some of them are contractual obligations, such as the OAR reentry services. That is a contract that goes up each year. So most of our items are, we also have the new building opening. So some of the items that we provide for inmates, we've increased those budgets because we will have the new building opening. I don't know if that, we will have, for example, we will have more, we're looking at more services for the inmates. We're looking at potentially free options. The inmates have tablets right now, and we're looking at some educational programs that we can provide for the inmates on that, which would be an increased cost over this year, but it's also a new item.
Okay, and I assume that some of that would be the case. So just a couple more. Specifically, could you tell me what is causing the twofold increase in the line for inmate accounting system?
That is basically providing the technology equipment. So it's probably not the best description. In the past, that was mainly for accounting system. That's basically to provide any computer equipment for the inmates. So we will look at providing some new equipment for the inmates for reentry purposes, and that will come out of that line item.
Okay, got it. That makes sense. So I'll just ask, just for my own edification, if in the future I could get a balance or you know the ending balance for FY 2019, which was a full year execution, to compare that for execution trends, considering this is my first year on the board. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
This is Tracy Lennox. Just a point of clarification of two things. What is encompassed in the indigent inmate supplies?
These are supplies that we provide to the inmates when they come in. If they don't have funding, it's shampoo, soap, toothpaste, things like that. The Auditor of Public Accounts for the state allows us to purchase those supplies out of this fund, so we've started doing that, and so
Okay.
that's what that's for.
And how about the miscellaneous?
Miscellaneous are small items that we may purchase. We looked in there. It's things like an ironing board for the work release inmates so they can iron their clothes before they go to work. Some items like that that don't quite fit into any of the other categories.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Viana? Thank you, Carol. At this time, I want to recognize Board Member Jackie Smith. I think she just signed in. Good evening, Jackie. How are you doing?
Hi, Sheriff. I'm fine. How are you? My apologies. I called in and I was muted. I didn't realize I needed to go through the app, but Ms. Guzman was able to help me. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, thank you. And thank you for joining us. At this time, I need a motion to approve the commissary budget.
So moved.
Well, this is Tracy Lennox. I'll second.
Who was the motion made by?
Jackie Smith.
Thank you. Motion by Smith and second by Tracy Lennox. Thank you so much. Any questions? David, could you call the roll, please?
Ashworth,
Yes.
Austin's absent. Bailey,
Yes.
Bernard,
Yes.
Clymer,
Yes.
Guzman,
Yes.
Hill,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Lennox,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
and Torres.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you. At this time, we're moving through the agenda. We get to the ICE 287G presentation, and we'll start with Mr. Henry Lucero. Good evening, sir.
Hello and good evening. Thank you for having me. Just want to make sure you can hear me before I start.
Yes, sir, I can.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you all. And good evening. I'm Henry Lucero, Director for ICE Enforcement and Removal Operations, and have the honor of leading approximately 7,800 employees nationwide and around the world. I also have Lyle Bolins here with me in our Fairfax office, who is the current acting field office director for the Washington, D.C. field office. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak with you, the jail board, about the impacts of 287G program has had on public safety here in Northern Virginia. We understand the future of the program is in your hands. And to be clear, we are not here to advocate one way or another about the decisions affecting you and your county. Our role is limited to providing technical advice and to answer your questions so that you have accurate information on which to base your decisions, instead of the myths and unfounded rumors. To briefly explain it, the 287G program is a voluntary partnership where ICE trains and deputizes local officers to assist the enforcement of immigration law, but only in a jail setting. What it does not do is allow any enforcement of immigration law outside of the jail, and officers have no authority that is not overseen by ICE supervisors. ICE has no influence on local, county, and state peace officers who are making arrests in the field and deciding which individuals they arrest, who they charge, or who they decide to book into jail. We consider the program here at the jail to be a model program. By working together, it gives 24-hour coverage to ensure the screening of every individual booked into jail and guarantees those that are not lawfully in the United States or subject to deportation based on their criminal history are not released from custody to potentially reoffend in our communities. Unfortunately, Not everyone booked into jail is fingerprinted. As an example, individuals who are charged with drunk in public or a probation violation are not fingerprinted. Over the last year, over 600 foreign nationals were booked into Prince William-Manassas Adult Detention Center and charged with drunk in public. Some of these individuals may have had other extensive criminal history, making them a threat to public safety. Without the 287G program or a 24/7 ICE presence in the facility, many of those individuals subject to a removal hearing may have been released. It's simple, really. Without the 287G program, ICE does not have the resources to cover the jail like it has been the past 13 years. These types of partnerships are politicized, but I can tell you as a law enforcement officer and a civil servant who has served under many different administrations, it's not about politics at all. It's 100% about public safety. Because of this program, ICE officers do not have to spend additional time or be more visible in the communities looking for criminal aliens who have been booked in and released. When ICE is able to do its work in the controlled confines of a jail, the work is safer for all involved, and it limits the work we do to only those who are an intended target. It's safer for those who we arrest, our officers, and the general public. We understand immigration enforcement is a very polarizing issue. Many of those opposed to immigration enforcement will have you think that by not partnering with ICE, immigration enforcement will go away. That's simply not true. It just means our jobs become more difficult and the jail becomes a place where repeat criminal aliens may come in and out of custody, wasting county resources, and worse, possibly victimizing and reoffending after they are released. Detainers. These are requests that ICE issues to law enforcement agencies to ask the agency hold an alien for up to 48 hours beyond when they would have been released. The process here is more streamlined because we have what's called an IGSA, or Intergovernmental Service Agreement, with the jail, so we can house ICE detainees at the jail instead of having to immediately move them to an ICE facility. When an alien is identified by the 287G officers who is being turned over to ICE, it's really more of a custody transfer on paper versus an actual physical transfer. ICE or 287G officers only lodge detainers on aliens who have actually been arrested by a local agency. There are often misguided or sometimes intentionally misleading rumors that having a 287G program fosters racial profiling and scares the public away from reporting crime. Neither 287G designated local officers nor ICE arrest victims or those who witness crimes. ICE has policy that states, absent aggravating factors, ICE will not initiate removal proceedings against individuals known to be immediate victims or witnesses to crime. Before we open it up to questions, I want to reintroduce and let our Field Office Director, Lyle Bones, tell you a little bit more about the successes we have seen locally.
All right, thank you, Henry. We do want to get to your questions, but first we wanted to show you some of the results of this partnership with the detention center over the past few years. Since 2017, if you look at the rap sheets of all those arrested by 287G officers here, you'll see there are some significant charges and convictions for serious crimes, including 65 murders or homicides, 277 sexual assaults, 489 dangerous drug charges, and more than 1,600 DUIs or DWIs. This great work is the product of the 287G partnership with ICE. This is work those in leadership positions can say that they have supported to help keep your neighborhood safe. This is work that ICE may not have been able to do alone. That's why this partnership program was established, to ensure that there is a continuous coverage at this facility and allow ICE to use its resources to further keep our community safe. Whatever is decided about the future of the 287G program, please know that ICE remains committed to its partnership with the county, and we'll continue to do all we can to keep criminal aliens from being arrested and released to potentially commit other crimes. With me this evening, joining our meeting is Attorney Michael Gill, the crimes chief with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Virginia. And I believe that Mr. Gill may have a few words for us as well about some of the cases that we have submitted to the U.S. Attorney's Office that have come out of the 287G program.
Hey there, thank you, Lyle, and good evening, everyone, and thank you very much to the board for having us on this evening. And I just wanted to provide you a little flavor from the U.S. Attorney's Office as far as the cases that we have pursued where defendants have been brought over in cooperation with this program. The defendants that we prosecute for unlawful reentry into the United States after previous deportation are folks that pose a public safety risk to the community. We look at their criminal histories, look at what they've done if they pose a risk. Do they have gang history or anything that poses concern, or other factors that show that there's a risk to public safety? If the defendants cross into that world, then we prosecute them in federal court and they're brought over. I've got just a few examples of cases that have been brought in the past 2 years. These are 3 in particular that came out of Prince William County under the program. First, Ludris Teresas Cias, who was a native of Bolivia. She had been previously deported from the United States, returned, was found in Prince William County, arrested and convicted for aggravated sexual battery. In June 2017, she was then brought over to the federal courthouse and prosecuted for unlawful reentry prior to deportation, sentenced, and then subsequently deported after she served her sentence. Another one, Oscar Sao Carrero Alice, 37 years old, a citizen of El Salvador, who was previously deported in 2004, came back to the United States, and then was found in the county and was later convicted of taking indecent liberties with a child, possession of cocaine, and obscene exhibition. Then he was brought over and prosecuted federally for unlawful reentry after deportation. And finally, Alicio Garcia Gordillo, 38 years old, of Honduras, also previously deported on 2 separate occasions from the United States, came back, was found in the county in February 2017, and he was later convicted of aggravated sexual battery of a child under the age of 13. He was, after he served his state sentence, brought over, prosecuted for unlawful reentry following deportation, currently serving his sentence, and he will be deported after serving his sentence. We appreciate the cooperation and the opportunity to talk to you tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. At this time, the agents are standing by and an attorney to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Elizabeth Guzman, and I have a few questions from the panelists, if I may.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like first to ask, well, first thank the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Office for their presentation. But I have a few questions, and the first is, if they could explain to me how it's possible for these criminals to re-enter the country after they have been deported. If they could give us more detail, please. How is that possible?
Yeah, sure. Again, this is Henry Lucero again. It happens, unfortunately, all the time, whether we move citizens to their countries in Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Russia, or China. There are smuggling networks that get them back to a border, whether the northern or southern border, and they make illegal entries into the United States. We prosecute those crimes across the nation over 7,000 or 8,000 times a year, just as ICE officials, but our partner agency in the Border Patrol and Customs and Border Protection equally arrest and prosecute that many individuals. So it is an issue that is being addressed. Obviously, the wall is going up on the southern border in many locations, but the northern border is still has various ways that are easily to sneak into the country. So Individuals that want to come here, even risking a felony conviction, often still do, and will continue to do so in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Follow-up question, if I may.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what I hear you, sir, mentioning is that the reason why these individuals are returning to this country is because we don't have a system in place that will stop the re-entry of these criminals, or we don't have enough resources. Is that accurate?
I'm simply saying people can exploit our immigration process in various ways. The majority enter illegally by jumping over a fence or wading a river, or just simply walking across where there is no barrier. There's various different ways. Some individuals come in on passports that are valid, but they're made to be an imposter, looking like an individual, or have fake passports. There's numerous ways to enter this country illegally. Unfortunately, it happens far too often.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have more questions, but I would allow other panelists to go first, and then I will ask more. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Guzman, we'll come back to you. Other board members, please ask questions.
It's Sheriff Doug Keene here.
Go ahead, Chief.
Clarification on your presentation. So without the way you presented it, without 287G located in the jail, if a subject is released back out into the community, that could force ICE agents to do their enforcement actions out in our individual communities, which could pose a higher risk. Is that how you presented it?
Yes, Chief, thanks for the question. That's exactly right. Although we would still intend to cover the jail, we wouldn't be able to support a 24/7 presence that is there now, and undoubtedly individuals will likely be released. Let me just add that for the state of Virginia, or the Commonwealth of Virginia, Prince William County has the most detainers lodged in that county than any other county in the Commonwealth. So we would expect that those numbers would probably stay true as they have over the past several years. And, with people that we have interest in, that were released would kind of force us out into the communities looking for them to make arrests. Again, our job will not stop if if individuals get released. It just makes it harder and makes us more present out there to look for and arrest these individuals.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, this is Raul Torres. Can I have 2 questions for him, please?
Yes, Mr. Torres, go ahead.
First question. Alexandria, Arlington, Fairfax County do not have 287G's programs with their jails and immigration. Is that correct or not?
That's correct.
Okay. How do you enforce immigration with those jails without having 287G's?
Sure. So we enforce that really electronically through fingerprint submissions for people that are booked into their jail. We have a command center set up in Lorton, Virginia, that monitors folks that are not 287G program in the Commonwealth. Unfortunately, what we've seen is there is delays in those fingerprint submissions getting to our hands, and sometimes we are not able to lodge a detainer in time, and if individuals are released prior to us lodging a detainer. Some individuals get booked and released in a matter of minutes or hours. It may take our officers 4 hours to be able to lodge a detainer. So in those communities, we're out there more actually because of individuals we know had just got arrested, booked, and released. In the 287G program, that doesn't happen. We guarantee that, with our trained officers, everyone's screened and detainers are lodged if these people are removable or amenable to removal proceedings.
And my second question to you was, do you enforce immigration laws through the 287Gs on misdemeanors, not those murders, rapists, child molesters, but on misdemeanors like drunk driving, driving unsuspended, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes, we enforce immigration law for those that are in violation of U.S. immigration law, regardless if they've been convicted or charged with a felony or a misdemeanor.
That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Reverend Bailey.
Reverend Bailey, go ahead.
Thank you. My question goes back to the example of and kind of following up on Mr. Torres, the example of drunkenness in public. I really didn't understand what the point was that you were making there. I didn't follow the story. Could you expound upon that, please?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. So I was simply highlighting that generally, as I described, when we don't have 287G program, we're doing kind of our immigration enforcement at jails through fingerprints that are run through the FBI and then bounced off DHS databases that tell us that if they're in our system, whether they have an immigration history and they're subject to the initiation of removal proceedings. Now, I highlighted drunk in public and probation violations because those are two charges that if you are booked in at this jail, you are not fingerprinted. And if you are not fingerprinted, then we will not know, a fingerprint match that this individual is in custody. Now, there may be a biographic check done, a name and DOB, but those could be various individuals, and really we won't know until we can interview that person personally to determine if they are removable from the United States. And that's what the 287G program does. It screens everyone, regardless if they're fingerprinted, and asks that same set of questions, regardless of the country that they tell those officers where they're born.
Thank you for that. So I guess what I'm concluding is that 287G helps you get the drunk drivers and drunk in public also. I have another question, and I'm not sure I understood the implications of some of the statements that you were making. Does the Immigration Customs Enforcement personnel operate within Prince William County outside of the adult detention center?
Yes, and just to before I answer that question, let me just clarify that I highlight drunk in public because they're not fingerprinted, but that doesn't mean that those individuals that there's the totality of their criminal history. We've seen cases where they were charged with drunk in public, but in fact they had a conviction for rape, right? So those are potential people that would be released. And I'm not saying every drunk in public charge has that significant criminal history, but some do. And those are individuals that are, the biggest threats to the community if they're released. Getting to the second question that you had, yes, ICE officers operate all over the United States in every single county, and we will go to where the leads take us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr.
Sure.
Chairman, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thanks. This is Tracy Lennox. I have a couple questions.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Thank you. So for the three examples that you cited to us, the three individuals that had very serious charges, the charges that they have were aggravated sexual battery, indecent liberties, and then there were some others, but those were the most serious. You're aware that there's a presumption against bond for those charges, meaning that when those people were arrested, they would not have been permitted to have been bonded by the magistrate at the time that they were arrested, fingerprinted, and those fingerprints were loaded into NCIC and then shared with ICE. Right? You're aware of that. They're not going to get bond as they're standing there in front of the magistrate because by statute they can't.
Ma'am, I completely agree with that and no dispute.
Okay. And then the second thing is that when a person comes through, and by the way, my background is as a defense attorney. So this is really being informed, at least in part, by my own experiences with clients over 27 years in Prince William County. So the second thing is that when an individual comes into the jail and they've been arrested and they are, a detainer is issued because of our ICE agents, ICE trained agents within the jail, even if they're charged, let's say, with a DUI or a driving on suspended second offense, such that they are, they have to go in front of the magistrate, that detainer will issue by the agents in the jail, and then ICE would be taking custody of them when the case is done, even if the charges against them are dismissed. Isn't that correct?
I believe that is correct, and I think that the ICE personnel, what I'm talking about are the cases that we have charged federally, people that have significant records or pose a risk to the community that we have charged, and that this program brings them straight over into our custody.
Absolutely. I'm just pointing out that under 287G, what also happens is that individuals that detainers are issued for, they are transferred, generally speaking, into ICE custody when their cases are over, even if the disposition of the case in Prince William County is that they are ultimately found not guilty or found guilty of a lesser offense.
Yeah, I can answer that, and that's accurate. And I can tell you when they do come to ICE custody, the totality of that individual, what is known to ICE, is weighed. That those equities are immigration history, previous criminal history, ties to the community, risk of flight, national security concerns. And so just because they come to ICE custody doesn't mean that they will be detained in ICE custody. Decisions will be made by officers of ICE, whether they are eligible for a bond, whether they're eligible for release, or no bond will be given. They can also appeal ICE's decision to an immigration judge in most circumstances and ask for a bond. So I just want to make it clear that everyone that is transferred to ICE doesn't necessarily always stay detained. A case-by-case review is done on every single individual based on the totality of the circumstances.
Thank you for the clarification about that. But that's an ICE decision at that point. The local jurisdiction is no longer making the decision. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And then in the course of the ICE, in the course of the agents in the jail, intaking, I'm not sure what words you guys use, but when they're talking to the individual to determine whether it's appropriate to place a detainer against them or not, some of the things that they ask them about are questions about what their alienage is, and that information is conveyed to ICE as well. The statements that they make to the ICE agent is conveyed to ICE, and that can be used against them in those proceedings. Correct? For example, they end up in front of an immigration judge. If they've told the individual that they are not a U.S. citizens or are not here legally, that's going to get conveyed and used against them in the immigration court. Is that correct?
In immigration court, I mean, if it's part of the narrative, it's generally people are honest and tell us where they're born. Sometimes they do lie and say they're United States citizens, and we find out otherwise. Really, that's up to a judge to decide whether they're going to weigh that against them. But generally speaking, these people are not read their rights. They're not facing criminal prosecution at that kind of intaking part that you described. They're just simply they're trying to determine whether they're United States citizens or not, and if they're not, are they in violation of immigration law?
Got it. And as you point out there, or just as an aside to it, they're not entitled to a lawyer at this point. I mean, they're just at the point of intake. It's a civil inquiry, so there's no attorney involved. And in fact, once they go into ICE custody, they're not entitled like a U.S. citizen would be that's being charged with a crime. There's a Sixth Amendment protection that you get counsel, whether you can afford one or not. That protection has not been found by the Supreme Court to apply to people in ICE custody, correct?
Well, at that time of booking at a jail, they're not in ICE custody. They're going to be, in the custody of the county at that point.
Well, how about immediately after that detainer is issued? They're not entitled to an attorney for any proceedings that take place after that, are they? They can hire their own, in other words, but they're not entitled to a court-appointed attorney.
That's correct.
And in fact, if they have a passport or a consular ID, that's going to be seized by the ICE agent in the jail in the course of the detainer being issued. Those documents would also be seized and transported to ICE. Is that correct?
All of their property that is seized at time of arrest would transfer to ICE. If those individuals were released, they would generally give them back their property. But let me just expound on the entitlement to attorney. At the processing in an ICE facility, they're also given a list of free legal services and pro bono and low-cost attorneys that they're free to call at any time.
Yeah, and that's not a guarantee though, right? They're not entitled to that. They don't, like we would expect ourselves showing up in front of a criminal court, whether they're undocumented or documented, if you show up in front of a criminal court where your liberty might be at stake, you're entitled to an attorney if you can't afford one. But that protection does not apply in the immigration system, even though, in fact, their bodily liberty is at stake there as well. But it's just been found not to apply in the same way that the Sixth Amendment applies in our criminal courts, correct?
That's correct. It's not a criminal proceeding, it's a civil proceeding.
All right. Okay, that's all the questions I have for the moment. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Hi. I'd like to ask our speakers visiting us from ICE, when we look at the people who come into our jail, who are, for lack of a better term, eligible to be detained, when ICE makes that determination to detain or not detain, what is the ratio we're looking at there? What percentage of people are in fact not detained?
I'm not sure if speaking of it in terms of percentages is necessarily
Well, I'm interested
good way of
because
looking at,
the testimony has been, just because you're eligible to be detained doesn't mean you're going to be detained. We look at sort of your criminal history, the type of offense you're accused of, and we may not detain you. So of our 777, I don't have the number in front of me, but are we looking at, what are we looking at as the whole? Was there 1,000 people eligible and we only detained 777? Or were there?
Let me answer the question. So those detainers are simply the request to hold so they can be transferred to ICE custody. Not necessarily does that mean that 700 and something number equaled someone being detained for their entirety of their case. So that just means that those individuals came to ICE custody. We don't have the data in front of us to tell you that this percentage or this number were ultimately released and went through their immigration proceedings out of custody. That's something we could provide this board with, those numbers, but we don't have that data in front of us.
as Director Lucero mentioned, each case is unique and individual. Determinations as to custody are made definitely on a case-by-case basis. We have general factors that we consider, such as flight risk, equities, ties to the community, their criminal history, what threat they pose to the community. So it's not really a question of, we detained X number or X percentage of individuals that are coming out of 287G or from other jails or that we've arrested on the street. It's very much a ongoing case-by-case look. In addition to determining whether or not someone is amenable to removal, we also, at that point, make a custody decision. And obviously, their immigration history is going to inform our custody decision, because if they've been here a while and they have ties to the community, then those are factors in favor of someone not being detained and being possibly granted a bond or even released on an order of recognizance. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the agency doesn't really look at it in terms of, we want to or need to detain a certain percentage of individuals. It is very much an individual case-by-case basis.
And I understand that, thank you. And I'm not troubled by the process. What I may be troubled by is that the person making this determination is not an elected official. It's not a member of our local government. It's a member of the federal government. And I'd like there to be some transparency on the ratios of their decisions. If it's 99% of people eligible for detainer are detained, that's something that I would want to take a closer look at. So if you could provide that data to us, I would appreciate that. And then I guess you may not have the answer to the follow-up question, which is how many of those people who are detained are ultimately prosecuted for federal charges not related to their immigration status.
I don't think we have that data broken down by just from Prince William County. We generally track that data by the AOR, so that would include the Commonwealth of Virginia and Washington, D.C., which this office covers.
Thank you both.
Sheriff,
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
This is Lisa Clymer, and I have a question for our presenters from ICE. Can you explain what you mean by ties to the community?
Sure. So ties to the community, meaning how long have they lived in the area? Do they have a vehicle registered? Do they have a driver's license? Do they own a home? Do they have a job? So we're assessing that to make sure that if there's ties to the community, that makes them less of a flight risk and that they're going to show up to court for the immigration proceedings.
Just one follow-up question. Do you consider whether the individual has a spouse or children as when you're looking at ties to the community? Is that best community tie?
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
Sheriff Doug Keene, I have a follow-up question as well.
Go ahead, Chief.
Gentlemen, when you talk about your questions to a detainee, are those some of the same questions that would be asked to a person that was trying to enter the country legally through a border?
Not exactly, but similar, but not an exact pattern of questions. The questions that are being asked at a jail are very quick to determine citizenship. At a port of entry or an airport, it might be the manner of which they're seeking to apply and their intent of being in the United States. So a little different in the immigration context. It's really just to establish the citizenship at the jail.
But at the border, they are still questioned about a lot of that status before they gain entry into the United States, correct? Where they're coming from, background, where they're going, what their intent is?
Yes, that's correct, Chief.
Okay.
Chairman Barry Bernard.
Go ahead, Chief.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thanks for being here with us this evening. We appreciate it. So I think we've said this a couple times, but just to confirm as we think through this issue. So everyone who is eligible that comes into the Adult Detention Center, everyone who's eligible for a detainer at the jail, at the ADC, has a detainer placed on them regardless of the classification of the local crime, regardless of what crime it is. Is that correct?
That's correct. If they're amenable to removal proceedings, if they're in violation of immigration law, a detainer will be lodged on those individuals regardless of the current charges that they're being booked in for.
Okay, thank you. So there's no prioritization. It's low-level misdemeanor or the most serious felony there is, violent crime, what have you. Everyone gets a detainer if they're eligible.
Yes, if they're in violation of immigration law, that's correct. The equities and the charges that are against them or convictions will be decided when they're in ICE custody on that custody determination, whether they remain in ICE custody, whether they're eligible for a bond, whether they're eligible to be released on their own recognizance. That information will be taken into account at that time.
Thank you. Those three examples that you gave at the top of your presentation, were they arrested, excuse me, were they arrested, prosecuted, and then served time either in our adult detention center here or in a state facility? So they were arrested locally by the local police and then prosecuted locally here by our Commonwealth attorney, and then served time in the jail or in a state facility. And at the completion of that, they were turned over to you and you took custody of them after they served their sentence. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chief.
Okay, so did the 287 program have any bearing or role on the apprehension, on the identification, arrest, or apprehension of those three people initially?
Chief, I believe it did, and I can defer to ICE. That was in the list of cases that we had that had been flagged through the program, but I'd want to be certain if my colleagues from ICE actually know.
Okay.
Yes, to our knowledge, that's accurate. They were flagged and processed by 287G officers at the jail.
Right, I understand that. I'm talking about when the, and I don't know if these are county or city cases, you know, but on these three cases, the county police identified, city police identified, arrested, charged, apprehended, what have you, and brought them to the jail. Is that correct? They were arrested by local police, local authorities, and then brought to the jail. And then that's when you placed those detainers. That was your role at that stage, after the arrest.
Yes, that's correct. And in every case under the 287G program, that same explanation would be true.
So the 287G program didn't have a role in the identification or the initial arrest of the folks in those three cases.
That's correct. ICE has no influence of local, county, or state peace officers that are making arrests out in the field.
Okay, thank you. And again, just for my confirmation down here, and I appreciate your patience. So when you, excuse me, when you do have folks transferred to you from the Adult Detention Center, well, for whatever their local charges are, when they come into your custody, some, as you suggested, and you went through a very long and very detailed, I appreciate that explanation. Some are ultimately detained in your facilities, but some are released from your custody to come back to an immigration hearing and what have you at a later time. And we
That's
just don't
correct.
have the percentages and the raw numbers of that for this evening. Some are detained further and some are released.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have at this time, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Ms. Guzman, you had another question, correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I have a couple of questions. Number one, I am curious to know, because as I understand, it's only Prince William County and Culpeper that have these agreements. So my question to the officers would be, if this program is done, it's so effective as it was presented, why it has not been absorbed by other localities? If they could explain that to us.
Sure. So those are the two counties that we have agreements with in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We have approximately 125 agreements throughout the nation in 22 states. So it's really up to the local jurisdiction to decide if they want to enter into this program. Those that have are doing that voluntarily and in the interest of public safety.
Mr. Chairman, follow-up question.
Go ahead.
It's just that so we understand correctly, this is not volunteer program. It has a cost associated with it. Is that accurate, Mr. Chairman?
Repeat your question.
Does the program has a cost to the localities who decide to engage on this partnership? Because it was mentioned by the gentleman that it's a voluntary agreement. It is, but it has an associated cost with it. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yes, there is a cost associated with it, but there's also, we also charge the federal government for people that are incarcerated in our facility that are federal inmates. So we can offset the cost with that too. Superintendent, you have the costs involved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, you will, because I do have another question for the gentleman. If you could explain to us, as far as deportations going on in Virginia, we are comparing Prince William County to other localities. Could you please tell us the statistics or the amount of deportations in other places in Virginia?
That
that information, unfortunately, is not broken out by localities or counties in the state of Virginia, because the Washington field office covers the entire state, and we keep numbers on the number of removals, for instance, or the number of individuals detained. The average length of stay is done by each field office and area of responsibility as a whole, rather than breaking them out by individual localities within our area of responsibility.
Yeah, so to clarify, we have the total removals for the area of responsibility that's covered by the Washington, D.C. field office, which is the entire Commonwealth and Washington, D.C. What we do have available are statistics on detainers lodged at each individual facility within the Commonwealth, and Prince William has the largest number of detainers issued, and so we consider that the busiest one in the entire Commonwealth. I think maybe Fairfax and Arlington might be a second and third, but just kind of for a point of reference.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a follow-up question because I just want the members of the board. I was looking online a few minutes ago, and what I see at the crime rates in Prince William County, and maybe Chief Bernard or somebody else could answer these questions. When I look at the crime rates in Prince William County, 97% of the crimes are committed by individuals with legal presence in the locality, and only 2.9% were committed by undocumented immigrants out of the overall rate. Now, that is information that I found available online. I'm sure now it's different. Can somebody share with us information about that, please?
Chief Bernard, can you answer in those questions, you or Chief King?
Well, the number, I can tell you the number of, when we were tracking this, and we haven't tracked it for a few years, but when we were tracking it, the number of folks that we arrested who we suspected of being undocumented, and I'm using that word, suspected of being undocumented, was about, 2 or 3% of our arrests, something that in that neighborhood, 2 or 3%. And on the crime rate, if I may, the crime rate in Prince William County and the crime rates in Northern Virginia, looking at Arlington County, Fairfax County, Loudoun County, Prince William County, if you look at those 4 counties and you go back and look at crime rates, which are available at the, once there are many sources, but one source you can look at the Washington COG crime report that comes out every year. But you can also, of course, pick up the state report. But if you look at those 4 counties, all of them have generally similar crime rates. And you can see that, the crime rates they're not exact, but they're fairly close to one another. They're very similar to one another in those 4 counties. In the last 4 or 5 years, the crime rates have been similar. Now, the raw crimes, the raw numbers may be more because of population, that kind of thing. Fairfax, big county, that sort of thing. But when you factor the crime rate, it's pretty similar over those 4 jurisdictions for the last 4 or 5 years. It's fairly close in those 4 counties.
Thank you, Chief Bernard, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a final question. There were 3 cases that were shared with us during the presentation, and I believe this question was addressed before, but I just want to make sure that I understood correctly. So, well, number 1, I would like to share with the presenters, Latinos are the majority of the population in Prince William County when we look at the student population. So it's definitely, when we're using cases and these 3 individuals happen to be, Hispanic, I can't remember the countries. It's we are working really hard just to change the narrative of Latinos in this county. So as a person who comes from another country who is Hispanic, it really hurt me because, you know, we are trying to change here in Prince William County, trying to move in a different direction after we were labeled for so long as criminals. So my question about the 3 cases that were shared earlier, would those individuals would have been deported if there were not a 287G agreement?
And I'm sorry, ma'am, I missed that last part of your question.
If those individuals of the cases that it was shared earlier, there were 3 cases by
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Gill, would those individuals be deported if we wouldn't have a 287G agreement?
They would. The agreement, the benefit is with respect to apprehension of individuals that come directly through that program, that come directly to federal custody, as opposed to folks that are released. And then we would have, and we did have, a federal arrest warrant for those individuals, and they would have executed, but they would have been on the street having to look for them, which just puts more resources and puts them on the street, having to engage in the community to find these individuals to arrest them.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Sheriff Hill, if I can just interject, I'm not sure that was, you may not have fully understood what Ms. Guzman was asking you about. Those 3 individuals would have already been put into NCIC because they would have been arrested. They would have been fingerprinted. The information would have gone to NCIC. And then that information would have been shared with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, right? You would have known that those people were in the system, and ICE would have already had access to that. So ICE could have just, and would have, I would have thought, with this kind of serious offense, ICE would have just put the detainer on these people. They were going to be held without bond anyway because of the nature of the charge, at least until they can get in front of an actual judge. So it's not that 287G caused them to get detained. You know, they would have probably been detained anyway. Almost, I would say, gosh, 99%. They're going to get detained anyway, right?
They get identified through the program? Absolutely, ma'am. And defer to ICE with respect to nuances on how it works, and also situations where it helps identify individuals that would have slipped through and then they have to find them.
Yeah, and it's secure communities, which is, everybody participates in secure communities. If you're an ADC, you're in secure communities, right? So that's going to flag these people to ICE in the first place without 287G.
That's
right?
correct. In my earlier kind of statement, I also flagged that not everyone's fingerprinted, right? So in those cases, some could slip through the cracks, and some individuals, even if they are fingerprinted, are booked and released very fast. You know, within a matter of an hour or 2, depending on what they're charged for. So that's also a potential.
Yeah, no, I agreed. And I just want to make sure we're distinguishing between these 3 really horrible crimes that you gave as examples, and then the people that are charged with driving unsuspended, you know, arrested, charged, released, that ICE doesn't have time to get to them. But those are going to be misdemeanors. I mean, almost always they're going to be misdemeanors, right?
Yeah, and I bring this to light because maybe that's the charge that, you know, the crime they were charged with, but that doesn't mean that's the totality of their criminal history. So for instance, someone could be charged with drunk in public, but have been convicted and served 5 years in prison for rape. Is that, you know, individuals that we want back out in our communities?
Sure. I mean, absolutely. And yeah, and typically law enforcement is going to run a criminal background check on most people that come into contact, with, or if they come into the jail with them. Not dips, though. You're right. Those are going to be drunk in publics. I shouldn't just use the shorthand, but for most serious charges, they're going to run a record on these people before they release them. And 287G is not what mandates that.
Also, if I may, ICE has an international footprint, and we work with law enforcement agencies in other countries as well. So someone may be booked into the ADC with a relatively low level charge, let's say drunk in public, But I have a recollection of a recent case where an individual was wanted for homicide back in their home country. This person came to our attention through the 287G program. And so we will cooperate with those law enforcement officials in other countries to essentially send them back and face the criminal consequences there.
Yeah, and I can see why that would be perceived as a useful thing to be able to do. I just to round out that though, these might be individuals, for example, that would have a colorable claim under immigration law of needing sanctuary here because their government is dysfunctional. You don't know if their murder charge in El Salvador is a real murder charge or whether it's something else that they would be able to claim asylum over or something like that. I mean, these are pretty dysfunctional governments in a lot of cases. Is that right?
I don't think that's for us to comment on, but what I can tell you is everyone that we arrest has their due process. Ultimately, an immigration judge decides whether someone should be removed or remain in the United States. ICE just executes those orders of removal that are issued by an immigration judge.
Right. Right. Listen, I appreciate you guys being able to answer these questions. By the way, I know it's not easy times. So thank you for being here and having the conversation with us.
Thank you.
Board members, do you have any more questions?
Chairman Hill, this is Amy Ashworth. I just had something I wanted to clarify with them.
Go ahead, Amy.
Thank you. So I just want to make it clear that if we do not have the 287G program, there are still ways in which we, the police department, the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, can notify ICE if we convict somebody of like a homicide or a sexually violent offense. We can reach out even without having 287G and notify ICE if we think that's the appropriate thing to do, right? And then a detainer can be issued.
That's correct. You know, and if that person is still in custody, then a detainer could be issued. But we're more concerned with people that are released very quickly that would have otherwise been processed through the 287G program that are a risk to the community.
But hopefully we're not releasing too many people who are a risk to our community. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions for board members? Thank you so much. Chief King, do you want to, you got a couple comments you want to make?
Yeah, I want to go back to Ms. Guzman's question. I wasn't sure if she was directing that back to Barry or myself, but Ms. Guzman, to be clear, City of Manassas does not track your immigration at your time of arrest. We would never have those statistics. We track arrest only. We don't break it out into percentages, whether they're documented or undocumented. Number two.
Appreciate that clarification.
Yep. And number two is I do sit as the chairperson for the Northern Virginia Gang Task Force. The Gang Task Force is simply made up of all the local jurisdictions of law enforcement, basically from Prince William County to Loudoun County in. That agreement allows each of us to operate into each other's counties. As we all know that our gang members are pretty transient. They don't go by the dotted lines on the map. They cross over those borders to commit crimes in each jurisdiction. So just a small statistic, over the last 2 years, 90% of the arrests from the gang task force in the cases that we worked involved gang members that had entered the country illegally. And when they do that, that would be something that 287G would process as soon as they're booked into the local jail here in the City of Manassas, Prince William County. Is that correct, Colonel, Sheriff? At the time of the arrest, they would be ran through the 287G program.
That's correct.
Okay, so that is important. I think that's something we could all agree is that we do not want violent gang members returning back into our locality here in Northern Virginia, specifically Prince William County and City of Manassas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Chief, I would like to have a follow-up question. You know, I've been living in Prince William County here for the last 20 years, and the gun issue has been an ongoing issue for so long. And it's not only the undocumented immigrants, we have all type of guns right here in Prince William County. I mean, there is a list that I don't have in front of me, and they are from different nationalities, Ethiopia, Africa, Latinos. There's so many guns right now. And as I raise my children in the school system, I see those gang members entrenched in the school system as well. So it worries me. However, if you could please, since we are talking about that issue, could you tell us gangs compared to the overall rate of crimes in the Northern Virginia area? Because we have to look at the whole number here. If you could tell us gun-related crimes compared to other crimes, what is that percentage? Thank you.
Yep. I won't be able to give you that information across Northern Virginia. I'm simply giving you the reports and the arrests that as a whole, the cases that we as the gang task force have worked the last 2 years. So I don't have that percentage and those numbers broken out to you. Each jurisdiction probably in their annual report probably has those numbers listed because when it comes to the crime reporting, it's not reported as the region. Those crime statistics are actually counted back to the locality of those cases in the arrest, if that makes sense to you. Not trying to confuse you. So the gang task force does not report that crime statistics as a whole. Each individual jurisdiction is the one who reports those crime statistics.
Thank you, Chief. Chief, I have one question for you. If you had to look at all the jurisdictions in Northern Virginia and we say, well, what are the hot spots for gang in Northern Virginia? What area would you think would be the hot spot?
Well, it's not an easy question because it's pretty transient. It does move around. Currently, over the last year, maybe the last 18 months, we've had more activity in the City of Manassas in Prince William County. But prior to that, it was in Fairfax and Herndon. And before that, it had moved over to Loudoun. So that is kind of goes into the importance of the gang task force, which is outside of what we're here for. But currently it is, we're seeing more and more cases here in Prince William and the City of Manassas.
Thank you, Chief. Board members, do you have any more questions? Thank you. At this time, our superintendent is going to explain how the process works when a person is booked into the adult detention center. Superintendent?
Yes. Good evening again. We'll give you a little overview of our program and when it started and so forth. In 2006, we began a planning phase. The jail board approved our first memorandum of agreement with Immigration and Customs Enforcement on July 9th, 2007, our first 3-year agreement. The adult detention center staffing numbers, we received the first group of 4 officers. Soon thereafter, we hired 5 officers to perform the duties with police processing. Reasons for that allows the police officer to return to the community instead of spending several minutes in the ADC doing processing. However, due to the workload, these officers, the processors, had to assist and be trained in 287G. All the 287G officers, when they can, do assist our intake section to include police processes. And not counting COVID, but we can process up to 800 people a month. It's a very busy area out there in our intake section, as you'll see when we go on a tour. Procedures, a key requirement must be, individual must be arrested on a local offense and committed to the ADC by the magistrate or the courts. On occasion, while out in the community, I am asked, or someone will come up to me and say, I do not want to be deported. I do not want to be deported in this county. And my response is, do not commit a local crime. 2 questions are asked of all commits when they come in: what country of birth and country of citizenship. All foreign-born commits are investigated by the 287G, ADC 287G staff to determine citizenship. This can be as much as 200 per month, and not every foreign-born obviously is illegal. Most of them are shown to be legal as they go through this process. Several months with a 200 foreign-born come in, we could have 30 detainers. That has happened before. In the event they're in the United States or legally have violated their immigration status, an ICE officer will review the case prior to a detainer being issued by the 287G staff. Once their local obligation is completed or released by the magistrate or the courts, they'll be transferred to ICE within 48 hours, excluding holidays. And back to your question, Ms. Guzman, the ICE pays us $84 a day for those 48 hours, those 2 days before they're transferred. They're done with their local offense, they're waiting to be picked up by ICE. For those inmates who are transferred to the State Department of Corrections, the Department of Corrections, or another correctional facility, an ICE detainer will follow. The inmates who are here with ICE detainers are eligible for inmate programs. So a couple years ago, the Virginia Attorney General Mark Herring's opinion stated that local law enforcement agencies are not obligated or authorized to detain or arrest individuals for civil violations of immigration law unless the law enforcement agency has entered into a 287G agreement with federal authorities authorizing and directing such action. Training for ADC staff, 287G. They receive 4 weeks training at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Charleston, South Carolina. 1 week of recertification training every other year. Lodging, food, training, and transportation is paid by ICE. One thing that we don't really see often, I've never seen this happen before, but our particular group of 287G officers, ADC 287G officers, were awarded a Director's Award, a Homeland Security Award for their service in 2016. That is unheard of for a local facility operation to receive a Director's Award. And that's all I have, Chairman.
Thank you, Superintendent. Board members, do you have questions for the Superintendent?
This is Tracy Lennox. Sheriff, I have a question. Colonel, so you had talked about the fact that ICE remunerates us for the 2 days, I think you said $84 a day.
Go ahead, Tracy.
I'm sorry, go ahead. That isn't the full question, but go ahead.
Okay, in the event there's a holiday, a Monday, and they'll pick them up on Tuesday, they would pay us for those 3 days. That's the exceptions.
Got it. Okay. So what I was really going at, though, was that I think that the regional jail board or the regional jail budget, it has indicated over a period of time that what we actually, the cost, there's a net cost to the ADC of about $300,000 a year. Is that accurate?
It's right around 270, Tracy. I'll give you the exact number.
Okay.
287,000 was paid current FY, and of course we get reimbursed from ICE the $84 a day, which kind of offsets some of that.
Right. And you say you might have, how many, how many days a month might you get that you get paid back for, like total? Are we talking about 500 days or are we talking about 50 days that you might get back?
Carol trying to look that up on her computer.
Our monthly invoices normally have been in around $10,000. Our revenue for this fiscal year so far is $119,582,000. We, of course, it's extremely low right now due to COVID.
Right, right.
I think our last payment was in the $3,000 range.
Okay. So that 287,000, the offset is not going to be more than, let's say, 10% at the outside, which would be like $28,000 or something along those lines.
For that particular year we looked at, it was 116,000.
Okay. All right. So maybe what we're down to is about 160 grand. That is an outlay on the part of the ADC to run the 287G program. Once you balance everything that they pay you back for and everything that you lay out. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And I would just want to say, make it very clear, because you were talking about the award that your officers there have gotten. I don't think anybody would doubt the professionalism of your force there, Colonel. You got great guys in there, guys and gals working in that jail. So
appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Do we have any more questions from board members? Thank you so much. And I just have one comment I'd like to make. One of the reasons that I supported the program for the beginning, because I always approached the program as being a bipartisan program, simply because it was started under the Clinton administration. And of course, when the Bush administration was in after 9/11, they certainly used 287G extensively. And of course, President Obama administration, I think I signed 2 agreements with that administration. And we had that agreement for 8 years. And of course, this program has operated very quietly in Prince William County. We've had no complaints about it. And every place that I've been, when I go to sheriff conferences around the country and the ICE people are there, I kind of stick my chest out a little bit because they talk about the 287G program in Prince William County. And Prince William County has the model program for the country. And of course, as being a former police officer and detective, it's just another tool that we use to keep our community safe. And I wish we would, and I'm quite sure the ICE people can, if they want to talk about it, but people that get in the, after they had a detainer put on them and they get interviewed and they get information about other crimes that they know about in the community, that can be very, very helpful to our law enforcement personnel. And of course, it's my understanding that people that do have good information that they can give to law enforcement, they can get on a path to citizenship. So I support the program for a lot of reasons, and certainly because I think it assists us and help us in our community to help us keep our community safe. So any other questions from our board members?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. This is Lisa Clymer. Could you just sort of sum up for me what the impetus was for initiating the agreement, the first agreement?
When we got the first agreement, we were asked by the county board if we would consider the 287G program. And at the time, the board talked about it and the board voted to implement the 287G program. I think that was in 2006, but the program actually didn't start until 2007. And of course, I was on the board at the time, and I thought instead of rushing into the program, we would do some research on the program to see how the program would work and fit for us. So, and I wanted to make sure that we could actually screen inmates coming into the jail, not just 8 hours a day or 12 hours a day, but 24 hours a day. So I want to make sure we were set up and ready to go before we implemented the program.
Thank you.
Sheriff, can I follow up on her question?
Yes, ma'am, you can.
Okay, so back in 2006, I know that the Board of County Supervisors had proposed this. And that was a different, and obviously that was a different regime back then, but they also had tried to get the Prince William County Police Department to engage in utilizing 287G, and there was a big furor over that, right? Back in those days, for people that may not remember it, that was a big battle over 287G initially, and there was a lot of community frustration and pushback, and in fact, even Chief Dean, Chief Bernard's predecessor, went to great lengths to try to push back on what the board wanted him to do then, and was in the community for years working on that because he was worried about 287G, and the Prince William County Police don't do it anymore because they made the determination that they didn't need it as a mechanism for them. So the history of it, I agree with you. It's gone over many different government, representatives in the federal government, but that it's had a bit of a storied history here in Prince William County. Would you agree with that?
Yes, Tracy, I agree with that. But what happened when the Obama administration came in? They took the 287G agreement out of police departments and kept it and put it in local jails.
Right, and that's how it remained here with us. But I just want to say, I'm just trying to paint the broader picture. 287G has been contentious for our communities in Prince William County, and in fact, is to this day, there is this minority majority county. It's a contentious issue. It divides people in this county outside of law enforcement. I think law enforcement feels like by and large they would like to keep it, but the community at large does not have a happy feeling about. A lot of us don't have a happy feeling about 287G.
Hey, Chairman Doug Keene here, if I can speak, sir.
Go ahead, Doug.
Tracy, you're correct. I think all of us in law enforcement would agree, and we agreed with the decision that it did not belong in local law enforcement out on the street, and the proper place for it was in the correction facility where people had already been arrested and being processed. And if you've read the President Obama's 21st Century Task Force report, he even talks about it in that we need to get that out of local law enforcement because it can hurt those relationships. So I think we all support what you said, is it does not belong. And going back to when Chief Skinner and Chief Dean were here, we didn't believe that it belonged at the local street level law enforcement because of all the misinformation and the hardships it could cause with those relationships. And we believed then and that it should have been focused in the jail. So I think you're right. We've been chasing that storied history of this thing. And even today, people believe that we are out there doing it when in fact we haven't done it in well over 10.
Mr. Chairman, Barry Bernard.
Go ahead, sir.
Is this a time to make some comments, or with that, I have some comments, but I don't, do you want me to do them now, or are we gonna do them under discussion, or?
Chief, we're going to do comments. If you want to do them now, we might as well hear them now.
Well, with your permission, I'll proceed, but I could, if that's okay. All right.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. And Chief Keene is certainly right. I'll just add a nugget to it. We all agreed that this program didn't belong in the field. Out in the field being done by our police officers. I would just say we would sometimes start the discussion, if you're going to have the program, it would be better suited to be in an adult detention center if you're going to have the program. So there was a lot of discussion using that word if. But I want to just talk about trust. You know, Chief Keen also mentioned the 21st century report. I think, you know, building trust with our community and law enforcement is a foundational principle. It is extremely important. You cannot really do enough, and you have to work at it every day in policing. Really every day, you have to work at it with every personal interaction that you have. Every interaction a police officer has and the department has, you're working on trust. And today, we need to build trust with everyone in Prince William County, of course. And as it has been mentioned, we have a large, which I think is a strength of our community, a large immigrant community. We have about 23% Hispanic and about 24% of the residents of Prince William County are foreign born. And we are a majority minority county, as has also been mentioned. So we have to work on that, you know, trust every day with everybody, regardless of your background, but with everybody. And trust is just a very important issue. And so when you talk about this program, one of the factors for me is how does it impact the trust of our community? And I'll talk about that in just a second. Doug talked about, Chief Keen talked about the 21st century policing, and certainly I think we all subscribe, at least I do, subscribe to the foundations and the principles that you find there. And they have the 6 pillars. And one of the 6 pillars, in fact, it's the first of the 6 pillars, is about building trust. And there's a lot of action items in there that talks about trust. And I think that's a very important factor as we discuss this program. And I have some questions, and no one needs to answer these questions, but just things I've been thinking about as I think about this program. So there are 3,000 plus counties in the country, but only a very small number have this program. So, you know, I ask, you know, why is that? Again, nobody has to answer that question. Just, you know, that's something I ponder. And then we have 95 counties in the state of Virginia, and only 2 have this program. And so I wonder about that. So I wonder, you know, about its effectiveness as crime fighting strategy. And we heard about the 3 examples, and I appreciate that. And I want to commit, you know, thank everybody here from law enforcement and the professionalism that you exhibit on a regular basis. But as we look at crime, the 287 program does not assist us in local policing to identify and arrest violent criminals who have we've already done that. You know, when we investigate a crime out here in the community, we identify them, we apprehend them, we arrest them, we bring them to the jail, and then the 287, you know, they go through the screening, and if they're eligible, they have a detainer placed on them, but they arrive at the jail. You know, we've already brought them to the jail. And I want to be clear that when we identify, arrest, and apprehend somebody for a violent crime, the 287 is not a part of that. They jump into it once folks arrive at the jail, and they serve their sentences, whatever that may be, with or without 287, their local jail sentences, or in their state facility if it's a serious crime. They're going to serve those sentences with or without 287. We've heard about other programs that are available. The secure communities, I know there's questions about that. We heard about the command center, you know, in Lorden that facilitates detainers being placed on people from the other counties here in our region, in our area. So, you know, I wonder if there's another way to do for ICE to complete their mission, another way for them to do that rather than through this program. When you visit within the communities and you talk to people, and I know we all do, I don't have a monopoly on that. Everybody on this panel, everybody on the jail board, lots of people, of course, have conversations. You know, people are residents who, some residents in our immigrant community may be concerned about ICE. And while county police are not certified to act as agents of ICE, And our immigrant community is very aware and well educated that our adult detention staff, you know, has this program there. And some, and I'm saying some, you know, make a connection between policing, local police, and what goes on in the jail. They make that connection, whether we, you know, we can say, well, I don't do that. County police doesn't do that. County police doesn't do that. And everybody, intellectually, everybody understands that, but folks will still make that connection between us. And that's why I'm coming back to the trust. You know, we have this program, and it can have a reflection and create an issue for us on the trust horizon. So some in the immigrant communities will make a decision to avoid the police for concern that they or family members or friends will become caught up in an ICE deportation case that comes through the jail. So there's a barrier to the county police to protect our immigrant communities from violent crime because they don't want to, some, and again, it's never, you know, it's some don't want to come forward and talk to us and provide us with information, report crimes, and be witnesses and things of that nature. Because while they may be in the country as a citizen or have legal presence, they may have family living with them or others close to them who are not, and they're fearful of, well, if I call the police, you know, they may come and interview me and they may discover that some folks living with me. So that, I think that has an impact there. I was looking at the video the other day. What was, I was not part of it, but it was a very fine video. One County United. I don't know if everybody has had a chance to see that, but it talks about Prince William County being united. And I thought that was a powerful video, and it made me think of this program. Virginia is, as a state, is the in the top 10 safest states in America. And I looked at some data on that, and we're in the top 10 for crime rate in America, top safest, in other words, safest states out of our 50 states. We're in the top 10 of the top 10 safest states. We're on that list, which is a good thing, of course. So I've not seen any hard data where the 287 program has been, you know, shown to be a direct cause of any measurable crime reduction in Prince William County. We have examples, and I appreciate those examples. But surrounding counties, you know, they don't have this program, and as I mentioned earlier, their crime rate are similar to ours. They're comparable to ours. As we have this program here. And Chief Keene talked about the gangs, and certainly that's a very serious concern for all of us. And we are having some focus here in Prince William County. As he mentioned, if you'd asked that question a year ago, the focus would be somewhere else. And I suspect if you ask that question a year from now, the focus will be somewhere else. I don't know that. But as he said, the crime is very transient. The gang activity is very transient. So those are just some of the things I'm thinking about as I, you know, is there another way? And there is, you know, there is another way to do it, either through secure communities or through the program that ICE has out of Lorton, how they respond and handle other counties. And, you know, if we have someone who's convicted of a serious crime, there are, you know, can we come up with a format or a plan or an organized way to make notifications of people committing violent, serious crimes? I think we all agree, and I agree that people who commit violent, serious crimes, and they're not, you know, they're eligible to be looked at by us for shootings and murders and things like that. I think that needs to happen. When we got into this program, we used a term that we were going to focus this program on the worst of the worst. I didn't invent that term. I'm not sure who said it first. but we had that term we used. We're going to focus on the worst of the worst of putting detainers on people, you know, the people who committed violent crimes, that sort of thing. And today, we seem, you know, I think it's drifted away from that a little bit. And I understand there could be some value there. I understand the, you know, low level, but today we're putting detainers on everybody, regardless of the crime committed. And so I think we've drifted away from that a little bit. So those are just some things I'm thinking about. You know, I do wonder if this program has run its course, and I wonder if there's another way for Aishan and through those other programs that 2 or 3 people have talked about here, made comments about it. And it seems like there is. And I do wonder why, as I say, just a small number of communities across America have this program. And so that's where I am. I appreciate the time to make some comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chief. Any more comments?
And you'll be to be commended for instituting the programs that you have to increase that trust. Sheriff Hill, my question is for you at this time. I want to make sure I understand what it is that you're trying to impart to this board. You said, I believe, and I've heard you say it before, and you said it again tonight, you either used the term nonpartisan or bipartisan. You stated that one of the reasons you supported the use of this program because it was nonpartisan or bipartisan. And then you use the example of the Obama administration, who, when addressing the tragedy in 2014 of Michael Brown, put together a commission that actually came up with the precepts of 21st century policing that both of our police chiefs have talked about, that many, if not most, police chiefs across the nation have taken parts of that and put that into their DNA of their police departments. Are you saying that because as part of that particular effort, that the Obama administration did not try to do away with 287G, that we should take that as something that we should consider and therefore support the program?
No, what I was saying is that sometimes, especially here lately, sometimes we look at what we want to support based on who's in the White House. I support the 287G program regardless of who's in the White House. I think I wanted to make that point, Reverend Gozer Bailey. That was my point I wanted to make, that I looked at it as a bipartisan program because it was supported by Democrats and Republicans. I didn't look at it as a political issue.
Thank you.
All right, if there are no more questions, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just say a few things before we go and vote.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just, have a question for you. After I watched the last meeting in the County Board of Supervisors, I believe there is a resolution that exists now in place where the county supervisors sent to you saying that they are in opposition of this program.
Repeat your question.
Is the current County Board of Supervisors in favor of this program? What I understood is they send you a resolution that they are in opposition of the program, of the extension of the program. Is that accurate?
No, I have not received a resolution from the current board. No, I have not.
Okay. Well, if that's not the case, I want to thank Deborah. I think what it was, I can remember her name, your assistant, that sent us the public comments. And I took the time yesterday to look at the numbers and just calculate who lives in the county, who doesn't live in the county. We get quite a few public comments from people who live outside the county, but I took the time to look at those who live within the county and their public testimonies. And what I've seen was that there were 193 testimonies that were sent to us, from which 36 out of the 193 were in favor of the extension, and 157 individuals who reside in the county are in opposition of the extension. And this information was presented to us before. And, you know, I'll be remiss if I don't recognize the remarks for Chief Bernard. After on my other role, it's been a pleasure to work with him during the 3 years that I've been serving as a delegate to serve this county. Thank you for your service. You will be missed, and it was an honor to serve with you, and thank you for everything that you have done. And I will conclude by saying, Mr. Chairman, that there is 1 out of 4 immigrants who reside in Prince William County, and 1 out of 3 in Manassas Park and Manassas City. And as an immigrant myself, I could tell you on the voice of the community that we don't like this program. It created division, and many people who look like me left the county because of that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chair, this is
Yes, go
Raul
ahead.
Torres. Yeah. I just want to say that in this day and age, we try to put equity lenses on things to see if whatever we do in this county is kind of equitable for people. And you try to answer 2 basic questions. First, who benefits from this program? And the second question is who's burdened by it? And if you look at who benefits, other than ICE, I don't see the local benefit of the program. ICE have a local government, a local law enforcement agency in the jail, actually working, doing their work, and making their work lighter to some extent. I don't think that the jail mission is aligned with enforcement of immigration law in any way, shape, or form. I think that the mission of the Adult Detention Center is to house prisoners or inmates in a safe way, to have a safe staff, and rehabilitate inmates. I think that that is the mission of the Adult Detention Center. I think this is kind of a thorn. And when you look at the who's burdened by this, then you look at a trust of a community that for 13 years have been battling this particular program in Prince Williams County, that many people left in the early parts of this program. And then after the police no longer was working under this program, came back. I've seen studies by Brookings Institution, by Migration Policy, by the University of Virginia, and all seems to be that there is no real correlation between crime and the 287G program. So I subscribe everything that Chief Barry Bernard has said today. Those same questions are in most of our minds, and I don't see how this program really benefits the people of Prince William County. And I can tell you that it burdens a complete segment of our community. So if you look at this from that point, I don't think that this is a program that really have a place in this age and time in this community if we are to become one Prince William, a unified Prince William.
Thank you, sir. At this time, I will entertain a motion to extend the 287G Memorandum of Agreement.
Can we make a motion with an alternative to it, Chairman? Can we make a with the recommendation that we develop a program that focuses on felonies and DUIs? It seemed to me most of the contentions about the lower level crimes, if we can determine a better fit of one that is focused on felonies and potential DUIs, which is what I've heard from my community, that would seem to be more appropriate if those are the ones. I don't know if we could have that discussion or not.
That would be a good question for our ICE agent.
Your answer.
Yeah, Sheriff. You know, this in 2017, then Homeland Security Secretary Kelly listed out what ICE's priorities were going to be, to include threats to public safety, threats to the community, gang members, individuals who have already been ordered removed from the country. I mean, those are still named priorities for our agency. However, as I said, as I have expressed before, it's also very clear for the agency that no individuals who have violated immigration laws and who are amenable to removal are off the table for consideration to be put into removal proceedings.
All right, thank you, sir. Chief, that answers your question.
So, and Sheriff, I would just say, I would object to taking anything other than what you've got in front of us up. And the reason is not really to be, well, it's not at all to be difficult, but 287G is federal law. And there is not another, the time to find some other way, maybe in the future, Chief Keen. But what we've got is 287G, which is dictated by federal statute. You know, there's no, and frankly, the way it's applied in Prince William with our communities, and including City of Manassas, which has a sizable immigrant population, it's just broken, and the community's lost faith in it. Law enforcement it's affecting law enforcement. 287G as it currently stands, which is on the table right now, we need to vote on this. And in my opinion, law enforcement, it's an opportunity for you guys to send a message to your minority population, your people of color, the Black and brown people in your community, and tell them, all right, we get it, 287G's got to go. Maybe there's something else we need to do, and we can cross that bridge when we get to it. But as law enforcement, we're gonna, okay, we get it. You as a community, we want to, community policing is important to us, and we're ready to let go of this program. So I would object.
Sheriff, if I may just reiterate, an individual arrested in Prince William County for a minor offense may have more serious criminal history in their background, and that's something that would not necessarily be available to Prince William County. In particular, you know, the individual wanted for homicide back in their country. We have so many instances of that happening. There's another individual that came to our attention through 287G who's wanted back in El Salvador for being a MS-13 gang member. So again, arrested for a low-level crime. So
again, secure communities, that stuff's coming to you guys anyway. You know, you can find it yourselves without engaging our law enforcement, our local community law enforcement to do that. You've got other means, and it's not helpful for our communities to have. I'm sure you guys are doing, your jobs every day. You mean well, and you're doing good things for what you do, but it's not good for this community anymore. And we can go back and forth about the details and the anecdotal evidence all day, and I can give you 20 anecdotes from my career in the last 5 years, but I feel like we've hashed through all this, and I suggest we vote.
Mr. Chairman, Reverend Bailey.
Go ahead.
So a couple of things, with all due respect to our guests from the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, they are guests and they are not part of this discussion and vote that we are trying to have right now. I would also suggest, sir, that you asked for a motion and have not received one, much less a second. My question is from a parliamentary procedure standpoint, in this jail board, what happens if you do not receive a motion or a second to this 287G agreement?
To answer your question, Mr. Bailey, the program ends on June the 30th of 2020.
Thank you.
All right, receiving no motion, the program ends on June the 30th, 2020.
Thank you, Sheriff, for giving us a chance to have a real conversation about this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, and thank you to the members of ICE. And, you know, as you heard, we have quite a few problems here in Prince William County, and we need to use our local dollars to fix our own problems. So thank you.
Thank you, board members.
Thank you, Sheriff Hill.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you, Sheriff
Thank you.
Hill, for opening up the discussion to the community and also for bringing in the experts to speak with us today. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Next, we have election of jail board officers and appointment of jail board secretary. I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Panday.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You asked me to assist you in conducting this election. There are two officers, the chair, the vice chair, and then the appointment of the jail board secretary. I will take the chair first. Are there any nominations for chair of the jail board?
I nominate Sheriff Hill.
I second that.
Okay, we don't need seconds, but that's okay. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, is there a motion for to vote for Sheriff Hill as chair by acclamation?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We are having problems. Ms. Adami is having problems with the second. Who is that? If you state your name, please.
Barry Bernard.
Thank you, Chief. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry. We'll take roll with, I apologize.
Okay.
Ms. Adami was writing and I was giving her a break for a moment. So if you'd like to proceed with a roll call vote, please.
Ashworth,
Yes.
Austin's not here. Bailey,
Yes.
Bernard,
Yes.
Clymer,
Yes.
Guzman,
Yes.
Hill,
I will say yes.
King,
Yes.
Lennox,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Torres.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Thank you. The second officer to be voted on today is vice chair. Are there nominations for the position of vice chair?
Yes, I would like to nominate Chief King.
Thank you. Chief Keen is nominated. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to elect Chief Keen as vice chair by acclamation?
Make that motion.
Is that Chief Bernard? Am I getting that correct? Please state your name.
Barry Bernard.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Guzman.
Thank you. Ms. Adami, you have the opportunity to take a roll call vote.
Ashworth,
Yes.
Austin's absent. Bailey,
Yes.
Bernard,
Yes.
Clymer,
Yes.
Guzman,
Yes.
Hill,
Yes.
King,
I guess.
Lennox,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
and Torres.
Yes.
Unanimous, sir.
Thank you. We now have the third officer, which is appointment of the jail board secretary. Are there nominations for that appointment?
you know, I have to make this nomination because she stood by me for so many years. I'm gonna have to nominate Debbie.
Okay. Are there any other nominations for jail board secretary? Do I hear a motion to appoint the jail board secretary as Deborah Adamy by acclamation?
Second, Reverend Bailey.
Thank you, Reverend Bailey. There was a motion. I need a second.
So second.
Thank you, Delegate Guzman. You'll have to take your own roll call vote, Madam Secretary.
Ashworth,
Yes.
Austin's not here. Bailey,
Yes.
Bernard,
Yes.
Clymer,
Yes.
Guzman,
Yes.
Hill,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Lennox,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
and Torres.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I believe we've completed the election.
Thank you, thank you. I will do my very best to represent the Adult Detention Center in a professional manner. As most of you know, that I've been associated with the jail since it started and opened in 1982. And I'm very proud of it because our jail is nationally recognized for being one of the best jails in the United States. So I will continue to work with the superintendent and staff to make improvements to what we already have. And I look forward to working with the jail board and getting their ideas and suggestions how we can provide better programs for our inmates so they can return to our community better people than they were when they were committed to our custody. So I look forward to working with everyone. Next on the agenda is jail board matters. Any old business? Hearing none, new business.
Mr. Chairman, we included in the board package a draft of restated jail board bylaws. The bylaws have not been updated for many, many years. They will be reviewed in depth at the next meeting of the jail board and voted on at that time. If there are comments or questions in the interim, I would suggest that they be passed along to the jail board secretary, Ms. Adamy, and we will see if we can address some of those in the interim, but we'll discuss them at length and then vote on them at your next meeting if that's the will of the board.
Thank you, Ms. Bendak. Thank you so much. Before I ask for a motion to adjourn, I want to thank the ADC IT section for their help with our virtual meeting. You did just an outstanding job. You know, I didn't know what I was getting into when we talked about doing this, but you have convinced me this was the way to go. So thank you so much. Thank you so very much. Now we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Reverend Bailey.
Second.
Could I have a second?
Second, Lisa
Ms.
Clymer.
Guzman, I have it.
Yes,
Thank you.
second, yeah.
All right, any questions? All in favor? Call the roll, David, please.
Ashworth,
Yes.
Austin's absent. Bailey,
Yes.
Bernard,
Yes.
Clymer,
Yes.
Guzman,
Yes.
Hill,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Lennox,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Torres.
Yes.
Unanimous, sir.
Thank you. And thank you,
Thank
board
you all.
members.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
thank you, thank you. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
your
Your leadership.
participation, and I look forward to our next meeting.
Yes, sir. Have a good week, everybody.